Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. Hey there, Kate.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. Today, we are going to talk about a very hot topic among our students and probably among copywriters in general. And that topic is how to price your services. Are you excited, Kate?
I'm so excited.
So excited. So
I
excited.
hate pricing my services just as much as the next person. So
Exactly. That's probably a really good place to start is that if you're new to copywriting or if you're just getting started, just sticking in, you should know that there is no like exact science for pricing your services. There's no exact perfect formula. We can give you a formula, but there's no perfect formula that's going to work and every time it's going to be exactly right. And it's a little bit more of an art than it is, or at least there's as much art as there is science. And to that end, everybody hates pricing their services. Everybody. People who've been doing it as long as Kate and I have, people who've been doing it longer, and people who are just getting started with it. So if you are looking at pricing your services and you're like, oh, this is so tough, we feel you.
Yep.
We absolutely feel you.
And it'll get slightly better, but it'll never get, that feeling will never completely go away of like, ugh.
Exactly.
You're never a calculator that can do it for me.
Yeah, exactly.
There are, but they're really bad. They're really, really bad.
Yes, exactly. Be careful about anything online that gives you this is what everyone charges for this, or this is the hourly rate, or this is the salary for this role. Those tend to be wildly off, and I don't know where they get their information from. But
to give an example, someone shared a calculator in the group recently, and I was like, "Oh, let me just see." And so it was like, plug in the number of hours of training you have, which it went up to 100. I'm like, well, certainly after, 10 years of doing this, I have more than 100. So I maxed it out. How many home pages have you written? So you could plug it in based on the service. So I chose a homepage, just, I've done a lot of them. Put in how many I've done in my career, which was, I think, also maxing out the number they had on the calculator. Forgot what other choices there were. And when I hit, how much should you charge? It was $13,800 for a homepage. Which,
oh, well, good luck.
I'm sure. And I said it in the group, I said, I'm sure there's some copywriting gurus out there who would say, yeah, you should absolutely charge $13,800 for a homepage. I've never done that. I will never do that in my career. And good luck finding a client that will pay you that. That is not an ideal client. That is a client that is getting fleeced.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and look, we get it. We understand why calculators are appealing, because
I wish they worked.
Yes.
I truly, I was like, ooh, maybe this is the one. No,
exactly. And it makes you think like, well, I can just plug in the numbers, then I won't have to think about it. But here's the thing. Every single client is different. Every single project is different. Every single scenario is different. Every homepage is different. So you are going to have to figure out your rate for each individual project with each individual client. And the same thing too is sometimes people say, all right, well, I'm going to create a package, and I'm just going to charge this amount for this amount of, I'm going to do a 3 email package. I'm going to charge this amount. And then that's all set there. But that doesn't work either.
Yeah, every email is going to be different. And not every client is going to want 3 emails. They might want 7, or they might want none, or they might want an email and a homepage, or who knows. I don't think in my career had the client who wanted the exact same thing. And even if they did want something similar of like, oh, I need 5 pages on my website, they were 5 different pages, different clients, different amount of ramping up to get the information needed to even write it. There are just so many variables.
Exactly. And part of what makes us valuable as professionals is that we go into each project fresh and build a solution for a client based on their individual needs and that individual project. So if we say this is the only thing we offer and this is the only price for it, then we're not being the partner that we should be for our clients and not offering them everything that they need in order to accomplish their goals.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as time goes on, you might have, okay, this client, I priced this project for this amount. This client is kind of similar, but here's this extra thing they need. And so you'll have a baseline, yes, and you don't have to throw everything out the window, but you're still looking at it from a fresh perspective. And, we always say you never have to quote your rates when someone's like, how much do you charge? Ask them what's the project. Ask, and not even just what the project is of, I need 3 emails and 5 social media posts. Okay, then dig into that. What types of social media posts? Are they ads? Are they just posts? Are they, do you tend to do long ones? Do you notice who engages with what type of post more? Am I pulling content from blogs that are already written? So it's not as, it's a faster process if you already have what you're working with, or are you creating it from scratch? There are lots of questions you want to dig into before you even start working on the pricing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and bear in mind too that clients don't know what to ask. They're not professional copywriters. So the only thing they know to ask is, oh, are you a copywriter? Are you available? And how much does it cost? That's the only thing they know how to ask. So instead of automatically going, oh, I have to figure out what to tell them my cost, that's the only thing they know how to ask. So take a step back and you can say to them, you know what, that's a really great question, but I can't really quote you a price until I have a better understanding of your project, which by the way, is completely reasonable. And any potential client should appreciate that you're not just throwing out numbers, that you're figuring out what this project is going to entail.
The second you start asking those questions, they realize, oh, this quote is based in reality. It's not just here's my number and it's pulled out of wherever. They want context too. And so you need that context for yourself to give an accurate number and not just say, well, let me see how high I can go, or hopefully they pay it. You need to do the work to show them as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how could you possibly quote anything without knowing what it is? It's like, all right, well, I'm gonna, this is my price for this car. It's $500 for this car. Well, if you don't know what the car is, if it's a beat up 50-year-old Chevy, $500 might be too much. If it's a brand new Beamer, then it's $500 is way too little. You can't, in that same way that you can't price out a car if you don't know what the car is, you can't price out a project if you don't know what the project is. And it can't just be like, it's a website rewrite. Because that can be vastly different from project to project. And some projects are literally, going in and kind of tweaking what they've got. And sometimes a rewrite, which suggests that you're just going to go in there and kind of tweak. Sometimes you go to that website and you're like, I can't use any of this stuff. And it's a rewrite because the website is already up there, but you're really starting from scratch. And obviously you're going to want to price those two things very differently. And it depends on the number of pages. It depends on how long those pages are going to be, or how copy intense those pages are going to be. So you really need to talk with a potential client and really get an understanding for it before you can give them any kind of number. And a client, once you explain that you need to really dig into the project first, no client is going to have a problem with that. And if they do, then walk away.
You don't want to work with them.
You do not want to work with them. If
they might want to rewrite because they're like, oh, it's cheap and it's fine. But what they might need is a complete overhaul. And if they're not willing to see that, then they don't respect you as a copywriter. They're just looking for a solution that you frankly can't provide. I mean, you can, but you drive yourself crazy. I don't know how you go about rewriting bad copy.
Yeah, you can't. There's no fix for bad copy unless you just start
from fresh. Yeah, exactly.
Fresh. Yeah, exactly.
At which point that's not a rewrite. And to your point about clients, only knowing, not even knowing what questions to ask, even if they know the outcome they want, the deliverable, the number of whatever the deliverable is, 5 emails, whatever, they still don't know all the work you're doing to get to that point. And so all those questions you need to ask about the email help them realize, A, it shows your value, that copy just doesn't go poof into 5 emails, that there's a lot leading up to it and a lot of thought behind it. so that they get the outcome they want.
Mm-hmm.
So even if they know what they want, and can enumerate it, you still need to dig in so you know how to accurately price that.
Exactly. Because even if they say, I want 5 emails, there's still, it could be, are you going to have to do a lot of work with this client to really understand what goes in those emails? What is the purpose of each of those emails? How long are those emails going to be? And then the same thing with what I want a sales page. Okay, well then sometimes a sales page is going to end up being relatively short and sometimes it's going to end up being relatively long. So you can't, this really kind of goes back to our point about you can't have templatized costs for things because it's going to vary from client to client, and you can't base your prices on what other people are quoting either. Sometimes in the group our students will ask, okay guys, well what are you guys quoting for this? And completely understand that impulse, because everybody wants to know, like, am I in the right area, am I in the right ballpark? But it's going to be so different from client to client and from project to project, and even the area that your client is based in. If your client's based in Manhattan, you're going to be able to charge them more than you would if your client is based in Topeka, Kansas.
Yeah, it's a great point. I see a lot of people saying minimum $200 for an email. And maybe that works for them, but that's so arbitrary. There are emails I've written that I would never charge $200 for, even though my rates are high, because they're like a 2-line email, which isn't to say that's not difficult, but it's one of those emails that we're churning out emails all the time. And so it just doesn't make sense. The client would never pay that. Granted, do I work with those clients anymore? Not necessarily, but the point is to not have that flexibility. You're going to lose out on a lot of work, which I'm fine. If that email takes me 15 minutes and I'm still able to charge them $50 for it, awesome. Like, why wouldn't I do that? And if it's fun or if it's something I believe in, great. So that inflexible $200 is my minimum. I feel like people think it sets them up to attract clients willing to pay that much. But you might also lose out on clients who are willing to pay you a great rate, but just don't need a $200 email.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. It's a kind of an arbitrary number based on knowing nothing about a project. And that's the exact opposite direction of the way you want to go.
Yeah. And I think the experience and location aspect is super important. I think there are lots of folks in the group are at different stages in their career, different, UK versus Australia versus the US versus Canada. I mean, all of those rates are going to be completely different. And so, you need to do your work to get your baseline, which is, what is your rate? What is your hourly rate? And yes, you're not going to charge by your hourly rate per se, if you can help it. You're going to charge by that project. But you have to base it in reality. And that's the reality of, what's my experience? What's the going rate for a copywriter in my area based on my experience? And as a freelancer, bumping that up, we say multiply by 1.2, 1.3 to get that range of what your hourly rate should then be, and go from there. And yes, I don't know how long it's going to take me is the other piece of this. How do I know how long an email is going to take me? As you're practicing, time yourself. Include time for revisions and feedback. That's why posting in the group and getting feedback is so important. And if you're not in the CCA, still doing it and then revising yourself and going through that process, knowing that there will likely be revisions, accounting for meetings. And as time goes on, yes, you will get better of knowing about how much time for meetings, about how much time for admin type stuff. Emails that come in that might be part of the project. And sometimes it takes me 15 minutes to write an email. You better believe I'm going to account for that in
like
my
a
project.
Response to a client email. Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
Not
exactly.
even like a copywritten email, but a response to a client.
One I'm not even overly thinking, but just here questions you have a lot of thought into the research and the strategy behind it. So
and you may want to account for if the client seems to be kind of new to business in general and is going to need a lot of educating and a lot of hand-holding. Or on the other side, not exactly on the other side, but if this client wants copy and wants it fast, then you may want to add a rush rate, since you're going to have to set aside your other projects to get this done to accommodate this client. You said meetings. I think people always kind of, especially now that we're mostly on Zoom and on calls and that kind of thing, I think people forget to well, I'm just going to, talk with them a couple of times. Yeah. But if you're on the phone with the client for, an hour for your input call to get all that information, that's an hour you could be charging somebody else. And if you're on the phone for, a half hour or maybe even an hour when you're presenting the work, depends on the project, then you also want to factor that in there. And you need to build in time for revisions. It's not just the time that you are writing it. That is really maybe only a half of the actual time that you're spending in front of your computer. Because then after that, you're stepping away and then you're coming back with objective eyes and going back through and figuring out, because as we say, every word has to have a purpose. It needs to be as impactful as it can be. It needs to be in the brand voice. I mean, there are all kinds of elements that make good copy or great copy great. And that takes time. And you need to factor all of that into your project price. And all of that is another reason why you also can't quote, or I shouldn't say can't, but we would recommend not quoting at the end of a discovery call. When you've talked to the client and they're like, yeah, I think I'd like this. And maybe you even have a good idea of what the project would entail now. Okay, it's a welcome series and there's 3 emails and da-da-da-da-da. To actually then live on the phone with the client, have to calculate all that and figure out, don't even try. Don't even try. Once you're done with the call, or once you have an understanding of what the project is, all you have to do is say, okay, great. This is a great call. I have a lot of information. What I want to do is I want to just go back, go through my notes, make sure I have everything. And then what I'll do is I'll send you an email with just confirming the project, confirming the date that I can deliver that first round of copy to you, and then the price. And I'll send that through to you by, say, end of day today. How does that sound? Any reasonable client is going to be like, great. And partially too, because they know what the next step is. They don't have to, what do I have to do next? It's by being a professional, you're like, all right, I've got this. Don't worry about it. All you have to do is look at the quote, tell me yes. And then even then I'm going to guide you through it. Then I'll set up the call and I'll ask you all the questions I need. A client is really looking for us to take the lead, to take, they have this copy project and they don't know how to write copy, or if they do, they're so overwhelmed that they don't have time to write copy. They're really looking at us to provide service and to be a reliable partner, someone that they can be like, okay, take this project. And we will take it and we will keep them abreast of what's going on. We'll ask them any questions we need to. We'll let them know, if it's a longer project, maybe send a little check-in just to be like, hey, just, it's been a little while since our first call. Just wanted to let you know, copy is coming along fine. You'll see it in your inbox and whenever. On the client side, it's such a relief to work with someone who is on the ball in that way. And I guess we're going a little bit off from talking about charging for your services, but to circle back,
it's all related.
To circle back, when you say to a client at the end of a call, at the end of that discovery call, here's what's going to happen. It's perfectly reasonable. And because they know, because you told them when they're going to get the quote through, there's no surprise. There's nothing, they don't expect you to quote them on that call. And even if they did, it would be still, when you say, okay, I want to look at my notes and just go through everything, look at my schedule and all that kind of thing. And then I can send you through the quote and the project and all that. Even if they did expect a quote, when you explain it that way, it just makes it so reasonable.
It's a benefit to them that you're taking the time to provide a quote that is accurate for them and not willy-nilly pulled out of thin air. And one thing I want to point out too, because I think folks, when you hear, oh, I'm accounting for revisions and kickoff meetings and this and that, that's why you quote by the project though too. So they don't need to know broken out what your price is for each and everything. They need to know, okay, 5 emails is going to cost me this, or this, maybe the emails are different. So email 1 is going to cost them this and email 2 is going to cost them this, if they really need to know that level of breakdown. But you're rolling in all of the tasks associated with that project into that that quote. So if you have a 5-page website, you might have, the quote for the website. And then if you're doing a tone guide for them, that's a separate line item, but you don't need to break it out further. They don't need to know all the nitty gritties about your price.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because when you do start, if you send something through that's like this, and then meeting here, and then this, and then edits, and a client can start to go, whoa, this is complicated. Do I need to, how deep do I need to dig into all this stuff, and or feel a little nickel and dimed?
It's like when you buy an airline ticket, you're like, wait, but I thought it was this, but now there's this tax, and then there's this fee, and then there's this, and you're like, all of a sudden it's $500 more or whatever. And it might still be in your budget, and it might still be a reasonable quote, but it just feels like, oh, well, like I just want the airline fare. Why do I have to pay all of this other stuff that goes along with it?
Yeah. Yeah. And a client just wants the end result. So if you can be like, all right, I'm gonna get you in the result. Here's what the end result is going to cost you. It's so much easier for them. So much easier. And as we were saying, there are not a lot, but there are a decent number of elements that you want to factor in as you're coming up with your quote. You need to know what your hourly rate is. And we talk about how to do that in the CCA, and we talk about how to do it in our Facebook group. But you need to know what your hourly rate is. You need to figure out how long the project is going to take you, figure out edits and meetings and all that kind of stuff. And like we're saying, if there are any incidental, if it's a rush project, if the client needs a little bit more information, or you suspect maybe the client's going to be is a little bit flaky, you probably want to build in some buffer for that. And then you want to look at that price and figure out if that makes sense for you. But as we were saying, to go all the way back to the beginning, unfortunately, there's no exact science. There are going to be plenty of times where, no, I take it back. Not plenty of times. Every time you're going to send in a quote and you're going to go, ooh, is that too much? Or should I have quoted more? Every single project, because first of all, you don't know what's in a client's head. And second of all, there's no perfect number. You're always going to be wondering if you could have charged more, or if you should have quoted less. If they would, every client is comfortable with lower prices, but
I think the way to frame it is, though, or how I've tried to reframe it is, am I going to be happy working for that rate? And so I know if I say, no, I'm going to be miserable. I know I've undersold myself, and I know it needs to be bumped up. But if I feel good about it, I'm like, could I have charged more? Maybe, but why do I care if another copywriter is charging $10,000 for a sales page when I would never feel comfortable doing that, and I wouldn't do that? If I'm happy with my rate and what the client's paying me and my income, which I'm very happy, then, and they're happy and they're thrilled and they feel like they're getting a good deal, then everyone should just be happy. I feel like there's always going to be that doubt of like, oh, but am I as successful as this other person? And looking out there when you see these wild, like, this person charged $15,000 for a sales letter. And it's like, well, good for them, first of all. But is that true? I'm skeptical, but yeah, that's them, and for me, that's not what I want my career to be. Nor do I want to chase those clients that might be willing to pay that, of which there are a lot fewer, whereas there are tons that are willing to pay $5-6 grand for a website, so.
That's a great point, though, too. The comparison, we always say, don't compare yourself. You're not going to get anything good out of it, but also comparing yourself to other copywriters that you see online. And yeah, there are, I've seen some that have said that they charge 10 grand for a landing page and then go back to their website a little bit later, and it doesn't say that anymore. Interesting. But so bear that in mind that, people can say they charge anything, but whether or not they actually get paid that rate is a totally different scenario. I could put on my website, oh, I charge $30,000 for a website. But if nobody pays me for it, that's the key, is that someone has to, for it to be worth anything, someone actually has to pay me for it. But I can say that that's my rate, but it doesn't matter. All that matters is that it intimidates you. Don't compare yourself.
And I'd much rather have, be consistently working. I don't want to not work. My goal isn't to just charge a lot so I can work less. I'd rather have 5 projects at $5,000 than one project at 25,000 and then being like, oh, now I want to find my next big $25,000 project.
Mm-hmm.
If one comes along, great, but
well, I have to say too, the idea of working with one client on a $25,000 project, or even like, the 10,000, something that is so overpriced like that. First of all, that's a lot of pressure on you. Obviously, you are doing your best work no matter what price you're quoting.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have charged something, or when you have signed up for a client that is that expensive, that's a lot of pressure. And also too, when a client is spending that much money, they are going to expect a lot from you. And they may be, by virtue of the fact that they are spending so much, they may expect to be able to add extra services into that and move outside the scope of project and all that kind of thing. And again, it's not to say that you can't charge high prices, but when you start getting into this realm of like, oh, what would you normally charge for that? Okay, double it. And if they pay that, okay, double it again. Okay, and just keep doubling it until somebody stops paying. Like, at that point, you're not even doing a service for your clients. If your whole thing is just, I'm going to keep doubling my rate until they won't pay it anymore. I mean, what kind of a partner are you? To me, that just feels a lot like you're just trying to get as much cash out of your client as you possibly can. And if that's what you're in for, then okay. But in terms of my ethos, I want to charge a fair rate. I want to charge, and I want to charge a fair rate based on the project and based on my experience and based on the outcomes I know they'll get. But at the same time, I don't love the concept of, I'm going to charge as much as I could possibly get from this client. And that's not a way to develop a relationship with a client either, or to get repeat business from a client if you're just charging as much as you can get.
Yep. That brings up a great point. I'm going to quickly touch on some of the other ways people charge. You brought up the kind of double it again method. And I think a lot of content writers, for example, might come in and want to charge by the word, which never charge by the word. That just penalizes you for being a good copywriter, right? I mean, we're trying to say as much as we can in as concise a way as possible. So adding extra prepositions and pronouns or whatever to get it to be longer just doesn't work.
Well, and frankly too, if you are charging by the word, it penalizes you for being good at copywriting, as Kate said. But also too, if someone came to me proposing a copywriting project and said they were going to charge by the word, I wouldn't move forward with them at all, because it marks them as an amateur, that they don't know what they're doing.
I had one prospective client on, I think it was maybe a recruiter, and they're like, this is how they're charging. Okay. Best of luck to you. This is not, if you have I'm thinking email or, just projects that by virtue just don't require a lot of words. If you're paying like cents on the word, and I have like a 50-word email, which isn't out of the realm of possibility if it's a very effective email, I can't do that math, but that's very cheap. What, like $25 maybe?
Yeah.
So
yeah. As a copywriter, you want to avoid clients that are asking to pay by the word, because it's just not how it works. And they need much more education than you probably want to give them. And then from the client side too, if you came to me and said that you charge by the word, I would be like, nope, bye, best of luck to you, because it makes you look like an amateur. Because you are, frankly, if you're quoting copywriting projects by the word, I say this with love, you have a bit to learn.
And I think the other one, which I know we touched on briefly, but was hourly. And, there are some of my clients, I work with one agency, and they do hourly. And so fine, I've decided that for them, I'm comfortable with that. And it works out in my favor, because they're just wildly chaotic. But in general, doing hourly can almost penalize you. If you're incorporating time for revisions and then your copy doesn't need revisions and you're doing hourly, then you almost get penalized
for being good at your job.
for being awesome. So with hourly, you want to be careful that it does make sense for you. And I think there are scenarios where it makes sense, where you just maybe don't quite know, the client doesn't quite know the full scope of work or really what they want you to take on. And maybe it's ongoing work, which is my situation. It's ongoing work. So it's not, we're paying you hourly for a website, which I wouldn't do.
No, if it's a finite project, it's going to be so much easier to just figure it out by the project. Exactly.
And it's a benefit to your client. They know exactly what to budget for. And if it's anything's out of scope, then you say, nope, this wasn't part of the quote. And so I can price that separately for you, but they at least know, okay, here's what it is. There's no surprises then too, of like, oh my God, it took this copywriter 25 hours to do this at $50 and we weren't budgeting for that. It should have taken them 10. That's the other benefit of doing a project price, is that your client can feel very comfortable and not just have this unknown of how long is this copywriter going to take? Like, yes, if your hourly rate is $25, oh, wow, that's cheap. Awesome. And they seem great and we're going to go with them. And then it takes you 50 hours to do it versus someone who charges $50 an hour and takes 5 to 10 hours to do it.
Yeah. And when you charge by the hour too, you open yourself up to all kinds of check-ins from your clients, being like, hey, just want to check in. How long do you think this is going to take you? And how long and when, and how much, and you don't want to get into the point of, you don't want to get to the point of having to justify how long it's taking you to write something. And frankly, too, some projects are harder than other ones.
Yeah.
I mean, I've sat down to write something and just gone completely blank. And I've needed a little bit more time to do it. And on a project side, that's okay, because that's built in there. And then if it's on an hourly side, it's quite frankly, too, that writing time that thinking time, which is sometimes just staring at a wall, that needs to be factored into the cost as well. And sometimes projects are going to be harder to do than others. Sometimes it's going to take a little bit more time to get yourself into it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think a lot of people just think about the writing aspect of it, but the concepting is so important for every project.
Outlining as well.
Yes. Yeah. So all of that is included in what you're doing, the actual work beyond meetings and admin and all of that.
Yeah. So when possible, we would strongly recommend charging by the project. If you are contracting, for example, it's going to be a little bit different. And not for example, but if you're contracting, on the other hand, maybe is a better way to put it, where you are not on staff for a company, but you are contracted to work a certain number of hours for them. In un-COVID times, maybe you go into their office, 20 hours a week for 3 months or whatever. In that case, yes, that is likely to be, you're paid by the hour. But you also make sure that your hourly rate is good enough to make sure to justify being in there for that amount of time, or dedicating your time to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So I know we packed a lot in there. The good news is that this is recorded, so you can go back and start it all at the beginning and take copious notes. I always listen to my podcast on double speed, but I have a feeling that with the stuff that we cram in here and with the speed at which we speak, you probably can't do double speed, but I'd be curious. You'll have to let us know. Pop over to Instagram and let us know. I know someone's done it at
half speed and says we sound funny, which I can imagine, but it's an option too. That makes it slow. We need to slow down, which I hear that is that's the feedback
we don't
I'm
need
getting
to slow down. They could just use half speed. No biggie. Great. Well, you know what? However you need to absorb the information. The key thing is that you do. So we hope this was helpful. We hope it shed some light on admittedly kind of a tricky concept. But the good news is that while you may never be 1000% confident in everything that you do when it comes to pricing, the more that you do it, the more comfortable you will get at it. And the more you understand what your rates need to be in order, to Kate's point, for you to be happy with the project and know that you're getting paid a fair rate for the work that you're going to be doing. And that's really the most important thing. Thanks for watching. Make sure you don't miss any tips, tools, or tactics for copywriters by clicking subscribe right now. And of course, you can always find us over at filthyrичwriter.com. We'll see you next time.